Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene, where we gather from our many homes in this sacred hour to worship together. Welcome to the regathering of our souls, the refilling of our spirits, the repairing of our hearts. Welcome to a time out of time, a space to set down your burden, an oasis to fill your cup. My name is Linda Krennicke, and I'm serving as worship associate today. We are blessed this morning by the return of Mitch, who is here to provide some of our music alongside our wonderful Suzanne on piano. And Kat Johnson is behind the scenes making the magic of technology happen. Our coordinator of faith formation, Katy Siepert, will be speaking from the virtual pulpit today. Today, we're going to look at the role of beauty, the role that beauty plays in our lives, in our transformation, and in our movements. We need songs to galvanize our spirits, and we're going to sing a lot today, and really good songs too. There is a chorus around you of your friends from church singing with you. Let us settle now into worship and sanctify this hour with the lighting of our chalices.
In Unitarian Universalist congregations, we light a chalice when we come together for worship. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, you can light it now, or you can do as Suzanne is doing with your hands, make a chalice. Know that the flame is burning in the houses of your fellow church members, connecting all of us. These are the words of Leslie Takahashi. On the brink. All that we have ever loved and all that we have ever been stands with us on the brink of all that we aspire to create. A deeper peace, a larger love, a more embracing hope, a greater generosity of spirit, a deeper joy in this life we share. On this day, each week, we join together to turn our collective consciousness toward the Spirit. We're called to love and to laugh, to cry, and at times to pound our fists in collective gestures of community. There is nothing that binds you to this time, I'm aware, and to this space, except those invisible bonds of this loving community of faith and hope and action. So I want us to invite us now to settle a little deeper in to this time, this worship. And I want you, if you're comfortable with this, to close your eyes and just take some deep breaths. Centering yourself in this space, in this time. Really feel the pressure of the planet holding you, pushing back up against you as you sit in your seat, your cushion, in your home, wherever you are. Take another big deep breath, settle more deeply in. Letting that love guide us to a sense of centeredness, sense of togetherness, a sense of being exactly where we need to be in this moment. One more big, deep breath.
Many people are surprised to learn that Lift Every Voice and Sing was first written as a poem. Written by James Weldon Johnson, it was performed for the first time by 500 school children in celebration of President Lincoln's birthday on February 12th, 1900 in Jacksonville, Florida. The poem was set to music by Johnson's brother, John Rosman Johnson, and soon adopted by the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, as its official song. Today, Lift Every Voice and Sing is one of the most cherished songs of the African American civil rights movement, and it is often referred to as the Black National Anthem. I will first share with you a reading by Aisha Asano, and after which we will all join together and sing Lift Up Your Voice and Sing. Today we are going to be singing Lift Up Every Voice and Sing. It's a very, very powerful song, but it's often sung without context. And at times it's sung without a lot of intentionality. When you sing Lift Every Voice and Sing, do you pay close attention to the words? It's easy on a Sunday morning to open the hymnal and sing along without necessarily processing what we're saying, what the words we're saying really mean. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Bitter the chastening rod felt in the days when hope unborn had died. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. This song deserves to be sung with attention. It is a song that starkly names the horrors and violence of racism in this country. And it is a song that should make us uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the history that it calls upon. Uncomfortable with the fact that the struggle for racial justice continues and has not come quite so far as it should have by now. How can anyone sing the words, treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered, without a deep, deep discomfort? So when we sing this song, will you join me in singing with intentionality? Will you join me in the deep discomfort that I will be feeling in singing those words? Discomfort with the pain and horror that those words refer back to. And discomfort with the fact that those words do not only refer to a distant history, but also to what is happening right now. Will you commit to sitting with your own discomfort? And then, will you tap into that discomfort and do something? Will you lift your voice and sing until the earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty?
In the words of Reverend Charles Uzel, there are messages that are best conveyed in song so that the heart and soul of the hearer are penetrated, convicted, consoled, and or encouraged. While a solo voice can do all of this, a voice united with others is even more powerful. So I sing. And these are the words of Angela Gabriel. I believe that throughout history, time and space, positive and even revolutionary change never happened without singing.
So I want to start this morning by telling you a story from my own life. When I first started attending this church years ago, I was young and I was lost. I was a poor single mom, and I mean by poor that I had no money. I was struggling to make ends meet. I'd been raising my son since his infancy as a single parent, and I'd earned my bachelor's degree by then, but that achievement hadn't really opened doors for me. I was working as a secretary. I was temping on the side. I just couldn't see a way forward. I'd hit a kind of wall in my personal life, and I didn't have a professional life to speak of. I knew I wanted something different. I felt bereft and afloat. And so I followed the advice of a friend, and I stepped through the doors of UUCE. I walked through that big, heavy wooden door at the top of the ramp at our old church, 40th and Donald, and I was flooded by anxiety. I really just didn't know what to do with this new experience. I had my 6-year-old son in tow, and he, in his perfect sage fashion, was totally delighted to be someplace new, to be meeting new people. I wanted to fade into the background. But we found a place to sit, and then Sage was asked to come up and sit on a carpet square. And the DRE at that time, Candy Cole, she told a story, and then the kids were whisked away, and I sat in my seat and cried all the way through our minister's sermon. The minister at the time was Carolyn Colbert, and I think she was talking about her daughters. There was something about acrobatics in there. I don't quite remember all the details, but I know that it absolutely touched me and moved me, and it made me jealous of their freedom. Hold on a second. I wanted what they had. In her book, Criminal of Poverty, Lisa Gray Garcia, otherwise known as Tiny, writes, one of the most dangerous conditions of being poor, single parent in the United States is the deadly isolation. Isolation can kill you, or at the very least, kill your spirit. I recently read those lines as part of an assignment, and wow, they really hit home for me. I think I thought I felt isolated at that time because I was doing it wrong somehow, but I'm coming to realize that something else was at play in my life in those years, something systemic and brutalizing, and all the more maddening because it sold me and others like me and those who were witnessing me the idea that I was a poor single mom for a reason, that I deserved the isolation. And then on that day in this church, with all of you, the choir began to sing, and something healing flooded through me. Hearing those voices collected together, rising and falling in concert, I knew that sitting in the seat made me anxious, but that joining the choir was something that I wanted, a way to literally use my voice. So that's what I did. At that point in my life, I didn't really know how to use my voice otherwise. Honestly, at that point in my life, I felt like every single decision I had ever made had brought me further and further from myself and from a life that I wanted. But singing I could do, and it made me feel part of something bigger than myself. And I knew I wanted more of that. So I joined the choir. And I got to do some solos, which was wonderful. And I got to sing in a production of Moses that still to this day just knocks my socks off every time I hear that recording. It was in the choir that I met some of my best friends, and we laughed together and sang off key together and shared meals and shared childcare. And one of the women that I met in choir became my housemate for 5 years. She's still one of my closest people. The joy of singing permeated other parts of my life too. It just unstuck me. It loosened my gears and got me moving forward again. It gave me something to look forward to. And it was motivation that was far more sustainable than pure fury or pure survival. So I want to share this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And it's a quote that is taken from about the year before he was assassinated. The dispossessed of this nation, the poor, both white and Negro, live in a cruelly unjust society. They must organize a revolution against the injustice, against the structures through which the society is refusing to lift the load of poverty. There are millions of poor people in this country who have very little or even nothing to lose. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new, unsettling force in our complacent national life. So the Poor People's Campaign, which was begun by King in 1968, the year of his assassination, was reignited in 2018, 50 years later. And it's tapping into this revolutionary power of voice. We heard from two members of the Moral Voices Choir as the intro to this sermon. And that Moral Voices Choir brings people from all across the country, from all different backgrounds and traditions and intersections of these systems of oppression that we operate under daily. It brings them together to celebrate, to lift their voices and defy traditions of capitalist, colonialist, neoconservativist, neoliberal messaging, which sells the lie that poor people are poor because of bad life choices. Poor people are poor in this country, this land of plenty, because the structures of American society are built deliberately to amass wealth on one side and misery on the other. It's not an accident. The structure was built that way from this nation's inception. First on the backs of indigenous bodies and Black bodies and brown bodies, and when it became illegal to enslave people outright, on the backs of poor bodies. If you go to the Poor People's Campaign website, you can find a ton of information about their platform, their message, and their actions. They also know that lifting voices together is a deeply powerful and human response to suffering. So I want to share one of the songs, the new songs from this Poor People's Campaign. It's called "We Are a New Unsettling Force." And I hope you'll listen and join in and sing along. I love that new unsettling force that Dr. King spoke of and that we just sang of. Shaking up this system we're in, that we're born into, or dreamed and worked and walked ourselves into as immigrants to this nation, or were adopted or forced into. That through these and many other pathways, this system is the one that we inherited, built to amass wealth on one side and misery on the other. The statement strikes me in a way that many other descriptions of what we're dealing with have not. I can almost picture those scales with their opposite impacts. And in this country, where we have ever increasing income disparity, which impacts communities of color and other marginalized identities disproportionately, we also have a few white men holding unimaginable wealth. Men with names like Bezos and Gates and Zuckerberg. It's been determined that it would take $20 billion to eliminate poverty entirely in this nation. And that sounds like a lot, $20 billion. Until you consider the fact that a single man, Jeff Bezos, has amassed $196 billion and every day is amassing more, especially in this time of COVID. Wealth, misery. Gates has 114 billion, Zuckerberg 96 billion. Any one of them wouldn't even feel it. You could pull out the checkbook and just write the check, hand that money over. Meanwhile, poor people all over this country cannot scrape together just $20 to buy themselves some groceries. Wealth, misery. The Reverend Leslie Takahashi wrote in her 2019 Berry Street address, "We, Unitarian Universalists, need to avoid spiritual bypassing." And we've talked together before about clean and dirty pain in the healing of trauma. Clean is what is left when you have gone through and done the work. Dirty is what spews everywhere when you haven't or you can't. Spirituality out of relationship with the truths of our time does not elevate or cleanse the spirit, she writes. Yes, rest and respite, care of the soul, it's critical, and yet many do not have that luxury. How do resourced communities share the burden of today's deep work a bit more so that others aren't left to labor nonstop? Today, in this time with COVID, the misery is being heaped upon the backs of Amazon call center workers, whose labor coincidentally is amassing more wealth for Jeff Bezos, but also nursing staff, grocery store clerks, bus drivers, positions predominantly held by people of color who are not only laboring nonstop, but putting their lives on the line to do it. And that choice isn't really a choice, right? I mean, what's more crushing? The isolation and dehumanization of living in poverty in this country, or the increased likelihood of contracting COVID by staying in your job? How is that a choice? So this question of balance in the universe that I wrote about in my blurb, this yin-yang question, I don't have an answer. I thought I would pose the question to you, but I'm going to put it this way. There was a chaplain that I worked with at the hospital, Chaplain Dow. And before I go into this next little part, I just want to warn people that there's kind of a tough sentence coming out the way that he posed this question to me. So if you have a history with sexual violence, or you have children in the room, you might want to hit your mute button for just a few moments. And then I'll give you a thumbs up when I'm through this part, okay? For those who might be triggered. So Dow posed the question, this balance of the universe question, to me like this. He said, people talk about the balance of things all the time. Someone once said to me that they find God and solace in the beauty of nature. But where is God? What does a sunset, the beauty of nature, provide when compared with the rape of a child? How do those things possibly balance out? A sunset isn't a source of strength, faith, or hope when it's put in that balance. That's really heavy. That's really heavy stuff. And truth be told, the world is filled with evils like this. Perhaps evils like this have touched your life. There are certainly countless books and news articles reminding us that these things are happening every day. We know for a fact that racism, poverty, patriarchy, misogyny, heterosexism, violence plays out, not out there, but in the lives and on the bodies of people, children's bodies, yes, and differently able-bodied people, and gender non-binary embodied people, trans people, impoverished people, Black and brown, and impoverished white-bodied people, people like you, people like me, every day. I've carried Dow's question with me for months now. At the time, I said to him, well, it doesn't balance it out. A beautiful sunset doesn't balance out rape or violence or misogyny, capitalism, destruction of our ecosystem. Sunsets don't balance out atrocity. Okay, for those of you who are muted, you can come back on now. But I came back to Dow a few days later and suggested that perhaps the beauty of the world that can act as our counterbalance to the ills can't be found in sunsets, but can be found in the connections we make with each other, the loving acts we engage in, the willingness to show up and be seen and be heard and be known by one another. I don't know if that works exactly when we look at that wealth and misery equation. I do know that in my life, connections that pulled me out of that debilitating isolation, connections that I found here in this community, in singing together in our choir, those connections help to make me feel seen and known and heard. They help to make me feel human. As I said, collective voice was a much more sustainable and motivating force in my life than fury or survival. James Weldon Johnson, the author of our song this morning, Lift Every Voice and Sing, he also wrote these words: every race and every nation should be judged by the best it has been able to produce, not by the worst. And there are amazing people and amazing movements and ideas that are being brought forth in our world today, the best of what we are producing right now. If you go online, you'll find countless organizations working and lifting their voices and laboring together to bring peace and justice and better balance. You'll find the Reverend William Barber II and the Poor People's Campaign, the organization that we've been talking about a bit today. It's working to forward Dr. King's radically inclusive view that the nation does not just suffer from a problem of systemic racism, but a problem of systemic and unequal wealth distribution impacting Americans of every shape, size, and color. There's the work of Emerge, the interfaith movement for immigrant justice, something that's local to Oregon right here, right now, a nonprofit working to free immigrants who've been detained. Emerge is currently offering opportunities for church members from all different faith traditions all over the state to gather in sacred circles and mobilize in pre-election action. So if you're interested in taking part, just a little side note, UUCE has a sacred circle. You can email me, I'll get you the information you need. How about the amazing work going on via social media platforms like Instagram? Work of women of color like Rachel Cargill and her online course, The Great Unlearn, or Layla Sayed and her book, Me and White Supremacy. Another side note, we'll be offering a book discussion group on that book coming this fall. And then there's this, the NAP Ministry, founded by Tricia Hersey, which speaks directly to the issues of rest as resource. Tricia writes, the NAP Ministry is an organization that examines the liberating power of naps. We believe rest is a form of resistance and names sleep deprivation as a racial and social justice issue. These things are happening in the world, and there are opportunities for us to use our voices. The Reverend Leslie Takahashi asks the following questions of us as Unitarian Universalists. And I want to put these questions to you as I put them to myself as we carry them forward. How can we develop new rituals of lament which allow us to name together and to truly hold that our institutions were built on the lands of dispossessed Indigenous people, and often the resources among us amassed through the labor of people of color, especially Black bodies? How do we address the institutional and cultural practices which devalue some and elevate others? How do we face hard truths about our inhumanity to one another? How do we develop practices and rituals around reconciliation, reparations, restoration? How do we equip our ministries to be trauma-informed? How do we honor intelligence which comes from the dignified and difficult work of survival rather than exclusively from book learning and intellect? How do we credential that in leadership? How might we renew ourselves not through spiritual bypass, rather by designing rituals to release guilt and shame, to name and honor our pain, to bring us into the embodiment that recognizes that we carry trauma within our physical being, not just in our minds and emotions. These are the questions of our time, this moment, in our shared religious and cultural history. A few weeks ago, Melanie DeMoore, she joined us for service, and I haven't sung that soulfully in such a long time. I was sitting here in my house, distanced by technology and Zoom, and yet still it was some of the most powerful use of voice I've had the pleasure of taking part in a long, long time. I know that for me, healing music must play a central part in the revealing of hard truths, the aliveness and capacity for joy inside myself and in resonance with others, sharing in the repair work of the world. Perhaps for you in your work, in your life, it's the music as well, but perhaps it is that sunset that brings a sense of peace or gratitude or respite. I ask that you give yourself what you need, whatever that might be for you in your situation, so that you can be replenished and keep showing up to the world, bringing your gifts and your voice. I know this moment is hard. It is difficult to see just how things can ever possibly be balanced correctly, but that's just it. We don't have to see the way out in order to move forward. Commit to taking small steps today to demand a shift of the wealth and a decrease of the misery for all people. Vote, make yourself heard, and please know you are not, in spite of what COVID or what divisive rhetoric or what the bad news might have us believe, you are not alone in any of this. Just as a choir cannot consist solely of a single voice or a single viewpoint, the work and the beauty of this world requires us to listen deeply to one another, to take our cues from one another, to model capacity to hold one another's pain alongside our joys, creating those connections which inspire us and hold us steady as we lift our voices to sing. Thank you. Now is the time in our service for lifting up our voices in joys and sorrows. You can type in the chat box whatever is on your heart today, whatever brings you life and whatever brings you pain in this moment. Just know that we are holding you as a community. For all of these joys and all of these sorrows, named and unnamed, I just want to hold you all in an embrace in this moment. Thank you.
Each of us brings gifts to share, to support our religious community, our time, talent, our music, and yes, our financial resources. This church and our work in the world is supported by the generous donations of members and friends. However you are called to give to this community of love, faith, and healing, we are grateful for your support. these offerings be transformed for the good of our world, the hopes of our community, and our highest ideals. Please join in singing our closing hymn, My Life Flows On in Endless Song.
Friends, go out into the highways and the byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women and people everywhere. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. Go in peace. Blessed be. And amen.